Hey, what's up, New Zealand and the world? Lucas Lawman's Kiwi Voice. Thanks for taking the time to tune in to us once again. We're having a look at world news issues today, so a bit of a global roundup for you. Before we get into that though, the officialities, if you're new here on YouTube, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already yet. On Facebook, hit that like button, comment down below. We're still in the mode of replying to almost every single comment. We like to keep the conversation open. So we've got a few issues to cover off today. As I said, a bit of a global roundup. No more mucking around. Let's get into it. Firstly, Elon Musk buys Twitter officially now for 44 billion US dollars, or 66 billion New Zealand dollars, proclaiming he intends to make Twitter better than ever. It has tremendous potential, he says, and that he will revitalise the world's town square. Now, plans also include enhancing Twitter by making algorithms open source so you can choose how your algorithm presents the information to you, defeating spam bots and authenticating all humans. So there was a post that went up there that showed people were concerned about losing thousands and thousands of followers not long after these announcements, and the conspiracy theory is that these were all bots dropping off, potentially government controlled or otherwise. So that's interesting. Twitter has around 200 million active monthly users. I've personally never been on the thing, but it is super influential around the world, specifically in the elite and political class, as well as shaping some other public discourse. So it is quite an important platform. So it's good to see someone with the absolutism of free speech taking over, really making the effort there. There's huge potential growth with the fact that it's only got 200 million monthly active users compared to Facebook and YouTube and others, TikTok, etc. as well. Long ways to go to get to those kind of numbers. So the future is bright for those that really do take an interest in Twitter and believe it has the influence that it does, as it appears from where I sit. Now, shares went up, which is good news, obviously, for anyone that's got any money in Twitter, but it is a surprise, as there was a lot of talk about a lot of people leaving, specifically from the far liberal left. Of course, you would expect that. Pro-censorship people, and they were expecting that the ethos of the company changing meant they were going to lose value and lose influence. We'll see how that all goes, but the share price did go up. Now, speaking of pro-censorship types, started losing their minds at the news of this, with thousands of tweets on the platform proclaiming they would leave if Musk takes over, that they fear for humanity if President Trump and Alex Jones accounts, for example, are reinstated, amongst other irrational call-outs. So all fairly predictable sort of stuff. We watch this here at Kiwi Voice with interest. We'll keep you updated. Meanwhile, in France, the general election comes to a close with Emmanuel Macron confirmed as the victor, becoming the first president in 20 years in France to win re-election after a first term. Now, this has been, the eyes of the world has been on this one, with particularly divided country there in France, far left, far right candidates going at it, and they were close up until recently. Now, there was both jubilation and rioting across the country as the news was announced. Firstly, there was this. Of course, reported by a lot of the mainstream media outlets as the country's reaction. But on the other side of town, there was this. So sadly, fairly typical scenes in a lot of Western countries around the world at the moment, with the divided nature of society due to the past couple of years. We're talking France, Canada, the US, New Zealand, and Australia. Now, in a speech, Macron vowed to unite a currently divided France, and with further round 3 elections due in June. Now, I'm not going to proclaim to be an expert on the French voting electoral system, but there's a third round of voting to come in a few months' time, which determines the makeup of Parliament. He's got his work cut out ahead of him because of this. Recent polls showed us that 63% of voters would rather he lost his majority and have to form a coalition government, known in France as a cohabitation. So he wins around 48% to 41%. Let's chuck that visual up on the screen there to give you the exact figures. These sorts of polls floating around saying that they would prefer that he had to form a coalition government. It appears that the French public were picking the lesser of two evils and hoping it was going to balance out with the June election. So that's an interesting state of affairs over there in terms of the elections. Keep an eye on that one. It appears there is a lot more to come out of that story, specifically with France's involvement in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And speaking of which, tensions in the Russia-Ukraine conflict continue to be escalated in the West, specifically the Western media, i.e. CNN, MSNBC, etc. over in the States, with Biden's continued gaffes as well as the persistence in American policy of supplying Ukraine with deadly weapons and the money, lending them the money to pay for them. Russian diplomats are advising they aren't going to respond kindly to this continued provocation or NATO expansion, as is also continued to be talked about. Russia's top diplomat, albeit on Russian state TV, will make that caveat 2 nights ago. He has warned that NATO is now fighting a proxy war with Russia in Ukraine, and there is a very serious risk, quote, the conflict could turn nuclear. Those are haunting words. Sergei Lavrov was his name. He accused Western leaders of risking a third world war by supplying heavy weapons to Ukraine with the goal of wearing down the Russian army. So concern further there in terms of just the rhetoric. Keep an eye also on that one. We will keep you updated. The tensions continue to go up there. The mainstream media will pick out the heroic stories, but the diplomatic side of things and pushing for a peaceful solution, whatever that may well be, is Kiwi Voice's preferred outcome. We'll see how we go with all this talk around the world. Now, moving over to Australia, Prime Minister Scott Morrison, staying on the theme of global instability, says he, in a speech, he won't be drawn on how Aussie would respond to the Solomon Islands if they crossed the red line, quote, which means they allowed China to set up a military base in the nation. He said it would not be responsible for him to say what the consequences for the Solomons would be if a base is built. Now, if you want to take the positive approach to this speech, he is keeping it fairly neutral, fairly easy, but also on the negative side, he's leaving things fairly open. Kiwi Voice continues to report on the China-Solomon Islands situation in conjunction with Ukraine-Russia, so we'll keep an eye on things there. Thanks everyone for taking the time to tune in. Keep an eye on the page, more interviews coming, all the usual stuff. Really appreciate all the love. The merchandise is coming. Keep an eye out that for as well. But for now, team, stay safe, stay free, and we'll see you again real soon.